Top story now, and Joe Biden has been forced to defend that his memory is fine after a damning report claimed he was struggling to even remember that he was ever vice president. In a surprise White House briefing, the 81-year-old responded to findings, describing him as an elderly man who has mishandled secret files.
I'm an elderly man, and I know what the hell I'm doing. I've been president. I put this country back on its feet. I don't need his recommendation. It's totally
How bad is your memory, and can you continue as president?
My memory is so bad, I let you speak.
I'm joined in the studio now by former military intelligence officer Philip Ingram, and from New York. He's usually here in London. He's the chair of the Republican Overseas UK organisation, Greg Swenson. Thanks for joining us from God's own country, Greg. Joe Biden, I mean, we've laughed about his mistakes, his pratfalls, his lapses in memory. But I think it's come to a head now, hasn't it? It's gone badly wrong. We saw him stumbling around about Hamas, couldn't remember what Hamas were called. Yesterday, he confused Mexico with Egypt. He's got the name of the president of France wrong, Macron Mitterrand. He's got the chancellors of Germany wrong. And now we know that the Justice Department, while investigating him for this alleged crime of misappropriating classified documents, compiled a 345-page report in which they said he was an old man with a very poor memory. This is the president of the United States who wants to stand again to be in charge of America for another 4 years. I mean, frankly, Greg, this just cannot happen, can it?
Kevin, it can't get much worse for President Biden. It was such a disaster yesterday. And it wasn't just the report. It's what President Biden tried to do after the report. He did a press conference as well as a statement. That's rare for him. He chose a really odd time to do it. It was after his preferred hours. He only likes to work between 10 and 2. So he went into overtime last night. He's trying to convince the voters and the press that he doesn't have these memory issues that were outlined in the report. And yet he did quite the opposite. He convinced the voters and the press that what was said in the report is true. So it was an unmitigated disaster for President Biden yesterday. I don't see how he recovers from this.
Well, quite. Now, a lot of people and the Democrats are trying to say, oh, well, you know, Donald Trump's not so great either. He's pretty old. He's having trouble with his memory. Well, next to Joe Biden, Donald Trump looks like Albert Einstein.
That's right.
Surely the Democrats cannot let this, frankly, bumbling old guy go into the presidential election. If they do, it doesn't matter who was against him. I could put my dog up to run against Joe Biden and he'd win. Trump will beat him in this state, won't he?
That is correct. And I think, you know, when they realize that in a few months, if the polls still show Trump winning in the swing states, he's up 5 or 6 points in 5 out of the 6 swing states. You know, they're going to have to consider it. Whether President Biden will say yes when asked to step down, I don't know. I think it'll be kind of fun to watch him say no and just go into the race and continue his kind of angry banter that he presents himself. And, you know, prior to his comments last night, you could have considered, and I think the report suggested this, that he was just a nice old man with memory issues. Now he looks like a very unlikable old man with memory issues. He came out very hostile, very bitter, very, very angry. I just don't know how he can recover. I think they will try to pull him. Remember, they did this, Kevin, in 2020 when Bernie Sanders was clearly going to be the candidate, and Biden had come in 4th in New Hampshire and 4th in Iowa and 5th in New Hampshire. He was dead and buried. And yet they were able to convince Bernie Sanders to step aside and put Joe Biden in the seat. This also points out to the real dishonesty from the White House. I know that it's their job, especially the press secretary, KJB, you know, to defend the president, but they're starting to lose credibility when people come on the air, both, you know, here on talkTV and in other networks, arguing that he's okay, his memory's fine, he's got, you know, great stamina. That's just dishonest, but also it lacks credibility. It's so obvious right now. We've all suspected this for quite some time. We know he was hidden in the basement during the 2020 campaign, meaning, they kept him out of the public view, away from the press, literally in his basement doing Zoom calls. That was really dishonest. Dr. Jill Biden, I like to call her Dr. Jill, it's clear that she was very dishonest, and his inner circle, in not admitting that he had some real cognitive issues. And one final thing on this report, Kevin, it wasn't just the interview that Robert Hur completed. He referenced an interview that was done in 2017, where the same cognitive challenges were obvious. And so that was years ago, and they knew it well before the 2020 election.
Greg, stay where you are, because in the studio I've got former colonel in the British military intelligence, Philip Ingram. Philip, what's your thoughts on this? I mean, this is allegedly the most powerful man on the face of the planet, the President of the United States, POTUS. He's got his finger on the nuclear button. He's lost his marbles, hasn't he?
It's quite clear that he has got memory problems and is not in a fit position to lead the United States and as a world leader. And the other worrying bit is, in some recent speeches by Donald Trump, he's stumbled over his words as well. So America is not in a good place at the moment.
And what's your take on what I mean, it's more Greg's area, but you must have your theories. I mean, the Democrats have got to do something about this. Yeah. Hitherto, I mean, we all know the Democrats have never really wanted old Joe to stand again, but he's a stubborn old mule and he's demanding to do it. Somehow or other, the Democrats have to work out a mechanism to get rid of this guy and put someone out who's sort of not quite as old as 81, perhaps.
Well, if he doesn't go voluntarily, I think there is, and I'm not an expert on the US Constitution and the rules for doing this, but I think there's a methodology for where the president can be declared unfit to fill his post, and then the vice president steps in. Whether well, exactly.
Kamala Harris.
Exactly. Who is she? We haven't seen anything of her. We don't know where she stands, and how that would then impact the presidential race. We're in for interesting times, I think.
We really are. I've never seen anything like this. Greg, let's ask you this. I saw some odds today that have emerged since Joe's terrible few days, which he's stumbled through, all of these balls ups that he's been making. The odds now, if Joe Biden is the candidate for the Democrats with the almost invisible, almost universally disliked, definitely useless Kamala Harris as his vice president, then Donald Trump is 5-4 on to win. The Democrats have got a crisis here. How do they go about persuading old Joe not to stand? Because if he does stand, they lose. And yet he's digging his heels in, isn't he? By the way, one last point, and will have annoyed you, in that his angry rebuttal of the fact he's an old man who's lost his memory. He said, "I put America back on its feet." Yeah. Did he? But how do the Democrats persuade this old guy not to stand?
Well, it's a great question, Kevin. There is no mechanism for this. There's no official mechanism except for the 25th Amendment, which would allow for the removal of a president. It was put in place after John F. Kennedy was killed in 1963 for obvious reasons. But they threatened to do this with Trump, which is almost amusing looking back at it, where they had really no merit to that argument. They do have that merit now. The problem is Kamala Harris would become the president. So I don't think you see Republicans or anybody on the right trying to use the 25th Amendment to get rid of President Biden as president. So because you'd have President Kamala, you might see it from her camp. You might see some radical progressive left Democrats in that kind of the open border wing of the party trying to get rid of President Biden and put Kamala in his place. Now, as a candidate, the best thing they can do is, as you pointed out, Kevin, is persuade him. And that's possible because, again, they did it in 2020. If there was an open primary, which they have basically not allowed, the Democratic Party has made sure that Biden is the only candidate that's on the ballot in some states. The only option they have is to pick someone at the convention that has some name recognition. It will not be Kamala Harris because she wouldn't even be in the top 5 if there was an open primary. It might be a little dicey, that the party that's obsessed with identity politics pushes aside, as they like to refer to Kamala Harris as a woman of color. That's going to be difficult for a party that bases most of their arguments on identity politics. But I think they'll have little choice but to do that, because you're right, Trump would win. Anyone would beat Biden in this place.
Yeah, as I say, my dog would beat Biden. My dog's probably got a better memory than Biden, probably more intelligent as well. A couple of thoughts. So the American election, as things stand, will come down to a battle of two parties saying, our old guy's got a better memory than yours. And by the way, Trump, as you say, I think the Democrats, this is a pretty low blow. He sort of forgot Nancy Pelosi's name the other day. Yeah. So they're going, oh, what about him? Well, you see Trump on the stand. He's still got his marbles. There's no doubt about that. Yeah. You might not like his marbles, but they're still very much there. But a few words before you go, Greg, last thoughts on Mr. Biden's claim, which I believe shows just how diminished his intellect is. He said, I've put America back on its feet again. What?
Which is hysterical. I mean, the country was humming on all cylinders when he took over. Had fully recovered from the COVID crisis. GDP growth was phenomenal. Wages were up significantly in the last few years of Trump's term. So what he's done is he's opened the border. So we have 10 million illegal immigrants. He's created a humanitarian crisis at the border. He's turned over the border to the drug and human trafficking cartels. He's created inflation, so real wages are down in his since he took office. And then you've got several foreign policy crises. The debacle in Afghanistan. Biden has done his best to wreck the country. He's done it with foreign policy. He's done it at the border, and he's done it with the economy. Those are the things that are important to Americans. He's polling at 18 on the border, 31 on the economy, and 33 on foreign policy. This is a disaster for the Democrats. I hate to pick on the poor guy, in regards to his cognitive challenges, but it's obvious. It's dishonest not to at least face it. And, should you vote for Trump because he's got better cognitive abilities than Biden? Probably not. That shouldn't be the only thing. And is Trump perfect? Does he have a perfect memory? No, but it's apples and oranges, though. I mean, it's completely different in terms of their cognitive issues. And then you've got the fact that, but if this becomes a referendum on two different administrations, if you look at Trump's term and you look at Biden's term, Trump wins hand over fist. The only thing I'm worried about is in the same polls that have Trump up 5 over Biden, they have generic Democrat up 8 over Trump. They're both flawed candidates. It's going to come down, if it ends up being the two of them, which I don't think it will now with Biden showing, with his showing yesterday. But if it is the two of them, it'll be basically, who do you like less, more? It's one of those things. So
as I said,
it's a bit of a tautology there.
Yeah, and who do you think has got the best memory? I mean, it's unbelievable.
It's a sad state.
It sure is. Greg, great to talk to you. I look forward to seeing you when you come back to London.
Thanks for having me.